Listen closely. This is not motivation. This is exposure. There is a reason your effort hasn't been rewarded the way you were promised. A reason the more you reach, the further things seem to slip away. Life does not resist you because you are incapable. It resists you because you are chasing. And chasing is not hunger. It is leakage. It is the quiet confession that your value depends on being chosen, noticed, approved. The world feels that instantly, and the world punishes it. Most people believe failure comes from weakness. It doesn't. It comes from clinging, from overextending yourself into places that never earned you, from negotiating your worth in real time, hoping someone will meet you halfway. Desperation doesn't need to speak. It radiates. And nothing repels alignment faster than a man who moves as if he needs permission to exist. Machiavelli understood this long before algorithms, before psychology books, before modern language put soft edges on hard truths. He saw that power does not move toward effort. It moves toward certainty, toward restraint, toward the man who can walk away without flinching. When you stop chasing, something violent and liberating happens inside you. The noise dies. The urgency collapses. The world that once demanded your attention suddenly goes quiet, like a room that realizes it has been speaking too loudly to someone who no longer needs to listen. This is the first shift. Withdrawal is not loss. It is filtration. When you pull your energy back, you begin to see clearly who was drawn to you and who was feeding on you. Most people were never interested in you. They were interested in your availability, in your responsiveness, in the way you reached outward instead of inward. You weren't magnetic. You were convenient. Machiavelli warned that the moment a ruler appears eager, his authority dissolves. The same law governs your life. Eagerness communicates imbalance. It says, I need this more than you need me. And the moment that message is sent, the hierarchy is decided. But when you withdraw what was never required, the structure flips. You stop rewarding emptiness. You stop letting people walk through the gates of your attention as if your presence were a public square. You reclaim the perimeter of your inner kingdom. Here is the paradox most men never grasp. The moment you stop trying to be chosen, you become the chooser. Alignment does not arrive through pursuit. It arrives through space. Space to observe. Space to measure. Space to let the unnecessary fall away on its own. When you create distance, reality reveals its true shape. What remains was never chasing you anyway. Think of it like blood loss. When you are wounded and keep running, you bleed faster. When you stop, apply pressure, and go still, the body begins to recover. Chasing is bleeding. Stillness is clotting. The moment you stop running toward validation, your value stabilizes. And once stabilized, it begins to pull. People sense this before they can explain it. They feel your silence before you speak. They register your presence before you arrive. Because power does not announce itself. It condenses. It cools. It sharpens. Power is the man who does not argue for his worth. He does not plead his case. He knows that anything meant for him does not require him to abandon himself to obtain it. This is not arrogance. This is alignment. Arrogance reaches outward. Alignment stands still and lets the world recalibrate around it. When you stop chasing, you stop bargaining with your identity. You stop leaking yourself into every opportunity, every conversation, every maybe. And something precise begins to form. A gravity that does not shout. A certainty that does not rush. This is where the transformation begins. Not with action, but with restraint. Not with noise, but with removal. The man you are becoming does not move from fear of loss. He moves from inevitability, and the world responds differently to inevitability. It always has. When a man understands the psychology of pulling instead of pursuing, his entire position in the world changes. Most people live as emotional debtors. They pay for attention with approval. They buy proximity with availability. They fund connection with constant reassurance. And they call this effort. But effort that leaks outward is not strength. It is exposure. Power does not grow in a man who is always reaching. It grows in the man who becomes a fixed point, a gravitational center. Dark psychology reveals an uncomfortable truth. Humans are drawn to what they cannot fully read, predict, or possess. The moment you stop chasing, you stop broadcasting your intentions, you stop narrating your moves, and suddenly you become undefined, unfinished, dangerous. Uncertainty creates tension. Tension creates focus. Focus creates pull. People fear what they cannot map, yet they orbit it anyway. This is why silence unsettles them. This is why your withdrawal triggers curiosity instead of indifference. It is not your absence they feel. It is the loss of leverage. They no longer know where they stand with you, and that destabilizes the entire dynamic. Machiavellian philosophy teaches that influence is not gained by announcing your worth, but by regulating access to it, by becoming a man whose presence must be earned rather than assumed. When you stop giving yourself away like a free sample, people begin to question the cost of losing you, and that question is where power enters the room. Think of it like heat. When something is everywhere, you stop noticing it. But when warmth is scarce, you feel it instantly. Your attention works the same way. When it is constantly available, it becomes invisible. When it is rare, it becomes valuable. The man who stops pursuing creates a psychological vacuum, and nature hates a vacuum. People rush to fill it. They start wondering what changed, what you discovered, what internal shift occurred while they were busy taking you for granted. But here is the deeper truth. They are not drawn to your silence. They are drawn to your certainty. Silence is just the surface expression of something colder and more stable underneath. You are no longer moving from reaction. You are moving from selection. This is not ego. Ego chases. This is alignment. Alignment understands that what is meant for you does not require frantic motion. It requires solidity, a presence so composed that reality adjusts itself in response. This is how you become untouchable, not by demanding respect, but by making disrespect irrelevant. When you stop pursuing others, you begin to see how many relationships were fueled by your effort alone. How many connections survived only because you carried them? The moment you remove that energy, the truth reveals itself without confrontation. Some people disappear, others step forward. Both outcomes are information, and information is power. Imagine a lighthouse. It does not sail out to meet ships. It stands immovable while others navigate toward it. Its value is not in movement, but in reliability, in position, in clarity. When you stop chasing, you become the signal instead of the seeker, and signals attract. This shift rewires your internal hierarchy. You stop negotiating your standards. You stop bending your frame to keep access. You stop explaining why you deserve to be treated well. And people feel it. They may not like it, but they respect it. Because respect is born from consistency, not performance. The cold truth is this: people do not pursue what is needy. They pursue what feels whole without them. The man who does not scramble for approval appears internally anchored, self-directed, unmoved by external chaos, and humans instinctively trust what does not shake. This is where your power begins to compound. You listen more. You speak less. You observe patterns instead of reacting to moments. You choose instead of hoping. And slowly, the world reorganizes around that posture. Not because you asked it to, but because you no longer interfere with your own gravity. This is the threshold. The point where chasing ends and alignment begins. Where movement becomes intentional. Where silence becomes weight. Where you stop asking life to meet you halfway and instead stand still long enough for it to reveal what was always coming toward you anyway. There is a moment in a man's evolution when he realizes that silence is not the absence of power. It is the refinement of it. Absence is not disappearance. It is repositioning. When you stop chasing, you are not stepping back from life. You are stepping into the shadows where leverage is built, where clarity sharpens, where strength consolidates without noise. Machiavelli understood that a ruler who reveals every move loses before the game begins. The unseen threat is always heavier than the visible one. The same law governs your presence. When people cannot predict you, they cannot control you. When they cannot read you, they cannot manipulate you. And when they cannot access you at will, they are forced to reassess your value. This is the art of strategic absence. Not withdrawal born from fear, but distance born from discipline. You are no longer reacting to every call, every message, every emotional pull. You choose when to enter and when to remain still, and that choice alone restructures the entire dynamic. Think of a fortress. Its power is not in how often the gates are open, but in how rarely they are breached. When you were always available, your presence became ordinary, expected, replaceable. But when you step back, when you remove your constant signal from the environment, something changes. Your absence becomes loud. It forces others to confront how much space you once filled without being acknowledged. When you return different, calmer, more contained, less eager to entertain chaos. People feel the recalibration immediately. They sense that they no longer occupy free space in your mind, that the doors are no longer unlocked by default, that access now requires alignment. You are no longer chasing outcomes. You are designing them. This shift unsettles those who benefited from your old patterns, because your absence exposes their dependence. It reveals who relied on your energy to stabilize themselves, and when that support disappears, discomfort surfaces, not in you, but in them. Your presence becomes a privilege instead of a routine. Your time becomes an asset instead of an offering. Your attention becomes rare and therefore valuable. Scarcity is not manipulation. It is truth. What is scarce is respected. What is abundant is consumed. Dark psychology makes this clear again and again. When something can be lost, it is valued. When it cannot, it is taken for granted. By stepping back, you reintroduce consequence into every interaction. You begin to realize something critical. You do not need to chase what is meant for you. Not when your name carries weight. Not when your posture communicates certainty. Not when your silence commands more respect than your explanations ever did. Controlled distance does what confrontation never could. It teaches others how to treat you without you saying a word. Imagine a chessboard. The most powerful pieces do not move constantly. They wait. They threaten space simply by existing. Their restraint shapes the entire game. In the same way, your stillness creates pressure. Your unpredictability creates caution. Your discipline creates authority. This is not about being cold for the sake of ego. It is about being composed enough to let reality reveal itself. When you stop chasing, you stop overplaying your hand. You allow time to work for you instead of against you. And time always favors the disciplined. Your silence becomes a signal, not of weakness, but of control. Your absence becomes a lesson, not of rejection, but of self-respect. And slowly, without force, without argument, the world adjusts its behavior around the man you are becoming. This is the Machiavellian edge. Distance with intention, timing with precision. The confidence to let people feel your absence long enough to understand its weight. And once they do, they no longer question your worth. They move differently around it. When you stop chasing, you reclaim something most men never realize they gave away. Sovereignty, the quiet authority over your own inner kingdom, the power to decide without seeking permission, approval, or reassurance. Most men spend their lives unconsciously asking to exist, asking to be valued, asking to take up space. And every time they ask, they hand their crown to someone else. This is the unseen cost of chasing. You begin to measure yourself through reactions, through responses, through how quickly others reply, how warmly they receive you, how often they choose you. Without noticing, your identity becomes negotiable. Your standards soften. Your boundaries blur. You begin to bend in places where a man was meant to stand. But the moment you stop chasing, the structure flips. You stop seeking permission because you understand a brutal truth. Power is never given to the man who looks like he needs it. Power moves towards certainty, toward the man who trusts his own judgment more than the unstable approval of the crowd. Machiavelli wrote that it is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. Not because fear is cruelty, but because fear is respect anchored in consequence. It is the recognition that you cannot be pushed, swayed, or guilted into abandoning yourself. When you no longer chase, people sense this immediately. Your boundaries begin to enforce themselves. You no longer break your own rules to preserve comfort. You no longer dilute your values to maintain access. You no longer abandon your standards for temporary emotional relief. And every time you hold that line, you send a silent message into the world. I answer to myself. Dark psychology confirms what Machiavelli observed intuitively. Humans follow those who appear internally anchored, those who do not scramble when challenged, those who do not collapse at the threat of loss. Stability signals leadership. Emotional self-governance signals safety, and people are drawn to safety in a chaotic world. This is where solitude stops feeling like punishment and starts feeling like sharpening. You realize that being alone does not diminish you, it refines you. When someone leaves and you do not chase, your value does not shrink, it expands. Because your energy is no longer being misallocated, your focus returns to its source. Think of a tree in a storm. The branches that bend too far snap. The trunk that stands firm absorbs the force. When you stop chasing, you become the trunk. You let external chaos pass through without uprooting you. Loss no longer terrifies you because you are no longer built on dependency. This is the Machiavellian reversal. The world bends for the man who bends for no one, not out of stubbornness, but out of clarity. He knows what he stands for. He knows what he tolerates. He knows that walking away is not defeat when staying would require self-betrayal. Your presence changes. People approach you differently, not because you demanded respect, but because your behavior demonstrated it. You become selective, measured, unrushed. And that composure communicates authority far louder than assertion ever could. At this stage, you stop negotiating with your own potential. You stop explaining why you are evolving. You move like a man who understands he is the prize, not in words, but in posture, in action, in restraint. This is the return to sovereignty, the moment you take your crown back without ceremony, without announcement. And once you do, nothing outside of you has the power to remove it again. There is a final shift that happens when everything you've practiced locks into place. Not a rush, not a breakthrough moment filled with noise, but a quiet, irreversible turn inside you. This is where the chase dies completely, where you stop moving like a seeker and begin moving like a force, where life no longer feels like something you are trying to win, but something that is responding to you. This is the cold ascension. At this stage, you are no longer motivated by fear of missing out, fear of being alone, or fear of being overlooked. Those fears belong to a version of you that believed power lived outside himself. Now you understand something different. Power is a byproduct. It emerges naturally when a man governs himself with precision. You become deliberate, measured, economical with your energy. You stop pouring yourself into people, places, and situations that never earned access. And when you do engage, it is intentional, clean, controlled. Your actions carry weight because they are no longer diluted by need. Machiavelli wrote that men must either be won over or destroyed. Not in a literal sense, but psychologically. Your transformation does exactly that. Some people feel relieved when you change. They no longer feel exposed by your growth. Others feel deeply unsettled. Your detachment forces them to confront how dependent they were on your old availability. To you, both reactions are irrelevant. What matters is that you are free. You are no longer trying to be liked. You are aligning. You are no longer waiting to be chosen. You are choosing yourself. And this shift creates a pressure in the environment. People begin to recalibrate around you without you asking them to. They speak differently. They approach more carefully. They assume less. Dark psychology explains why. Humans instinctively respect the man who moves without hesitation, the man who does not over-explain, the man who does not ask for consensus before elevating his life. Unpredictability combined with self-control creates dominance. Not aggressive dominance, but structural dominance. The kind that shapes outcomes without force. Think of gravity. It does not argue. It does not persuade. It does not chase. It simply exists, and everything else must account for it. When you stop chasing, you become gravitational. Opportunities you once pursued begin to surface on their own. People who ignored you begin to watch you. Those who underestimated you begin to speak your name with caution. The world responds differently to a man who no longer fears loss, because that man is no longer controlled. He can walk away. He can say no. He can disappear without explanation, and that autonomy makes him untouchable. Then comes indifference, not apathy, not numbness, but disciplined emotional independence. You no longer need the world to confirm you. You move like a closed system, complete with or without applause. This is where power becomes undeniable. Machiavelli understood that desperation makes a man predictable. Predictability makes him manageable. But indifference fractures that equation. When you no longer need praise, rejection loses its sting. When you no longer need outcomes, pressure collapses. You become calm in rooms designed to provoke, still in situations meant to destabilize. People feel this immediately. Your calm reads as command. Your silence reads as calculation. Your distance reads as control. And without trying, you flip the hierarchy. The moment you stop needing someone, they become more interested in you. Not because you manipulated them, but because you removed the leverage they once had. Indifference is earned through solitude, through walking away from situations where the old version of you would have stayed just to avoid discomfort. Each time you choose yourself over temporary relief, your inner structure hardens, sharper, colder, more sovereign. You stop reacting and start selecting. You stop hoping for alignment and start requiring it. You stop chasing potential and start evaluating patterns. Desire no longer governs you. You govern it. And desire, when mastered, becomes a tool instead of a chain. At this level, you develop emotional immunity. You are no longer inflated by praise or destabilized by disrespect. Approval doesn't validate you. Absence doesn't wound you. You see people clearly because attachment no longer clouds your perception. You observe instead of absorbing. This is the shadow crown. Authority earned without titles. Leadership expressed without noise. You become the boundary rather than someone who constantly enforces one. People sense that you cannot be pulled, rushed, or baited. That your reactions are no longer available for exploitation. Your standards solidify into an unbending frame. You no longer shape yourself to fit environments. Environments begin to shape themselves around you. The weak resent it. The insecure test it. The aligned rise to meet it. And without effort, your world filters itself. Finally, alignment arrives. Not because you chased it, but because you removed everything that blocked it. Neediness, over-explanation, emotional volatility, weak boundaries, scattered desire, self-betrayal. You are no longer at war with yourself. You are in command of yourself. And when a man commands himself, life falls into order around him. This is the Machiavellian truth most never reach. You do not ask life to bow. You refine yourself until it has no choice. You stop chasing life, and life begins moving toward you. Not loudly, not dramatically, but consistently. And once that happens, there is no going back.